Good evening. How are you guys tonight? Tonight we have a live audience out of state again, so that's exciting. So let's see where Pegasus takes us tonight. So the children had had a long day of homeschooling, and they were all excited about getting to hear a story. So they were all snuggled on the couch waiting for Pegasus to come, and sure enough, whoosh, down he comes. Mommy's running around the house, still cleaning up the house, but the kids are on Pegasus's back. And away he goes. He goes straight up in the air. So the kids have to hang on. They're just so excited. Up they go, up they go, up they go. And then back down. He says, "We're not going back in time. We are going to go to Dragon Island." So to the east they start, as fast as they can go. He's going fast, and he's going over Pennsylvania and New York and the other states along the edge, South Carolina, North Carolina, South Carolina, and across the Atlantic Ocean. And the children are looking out across the ocean, and they're looking for the mountains because they know where they're going this time, and they're excited. And they all want to see their dragons. It's been a couple days since they've seen their dragons, and they're really excited about getting back there. Pretty soon, there's the mountains in the distance, and the island becomes bigger and bigger, and the forest is there, and it's thick and green, and they can see the white of the beach. And Pegasus swoops down onto the beach, runs down, and then tips his wing down and said, "I've got to go. You have a wonderful time." He said, "You've got something really important that you have to do this time. It's another mission." Oh, they're excited about that. So away they go, and they start running towards the mountain, and then they hear whoosh, and around the side of the mountains come the dragons, each one of them their very own dragon. And they're whooping and got their arms up in the air and jumping up and down, and they're so excited to see their dragons. Their dragons make circles around them. And then they swoop up and down, and then they land. And then they crouch down so that the children can climb up on their backs. And the dragon said, "We've been called on a mission. So we need to get to the camp because you're going to need a little bit of equipment." So the children all get on, and they're supposed to be headed straight towards where the encampment is so they can get their things. But, they couldn't help but play a little bit of dodge 'em, a little bit of hide and go seek, a little bit of follow the leader, a little bit of up and down and around and twirl and try to catch each other by the tail. And they had so much fun. Little Lindley, she's hanging back though. She's got her little dragon. She said, "I'm not getting in the middle of that yet." But Tia and Desmond are going as fast as they can. They go straight up, 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 and then down, 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 down they go, and around. And then they meet up with some other dragons. And the dragon says, "The emperor has come to us and told us that we have a mission and we need to get there." So they go to the camp, and they're fitted with the right saddles that fit each one of the children so that they can stay on their dragon. And they're given great lengths of rope and chain and some other things that they might need, and they load them onto the back of the dragons, and they start going up the river. But there's something different about the river this time. Last time there was so much water in it. Remember, we almost had a flood, but this time there was less water. Now they got to be a little bit more as they went upriver, but they went up and around the mountain, and there was less water and less water and less water. So they finally saw that one of the rivers that were coming in, where the two rivers joined, that river was completely dry. It wasn't feeding into the river anymore. And the other lead dragon, he came down, and actually it was Luke on it. And Luke said he'd been called earlier. And Luke and Zach and Demetra were there, and they had been trying to figure out what was going on. And they had been commanded to go figure out what was going on, that the water was not coming down the river, and that meant that there wasn't enough down in the valley for the people that were down there, and the other critters and people that lived there, and there was something wrong. They couldn't figure out what it was, and they needed the water because they needed it to feed the lands so that they could grow the crops and all the things that they needed on Dragon Island. So they went up and they started following this dry riverbed, and they followed it up and up and up until it became mountainous, really mountainous. Big boulders, great big rocks and boulders, and they finally saw where there was this huge crevice in the rocks. And just then, Tia comes past this big crevice, and out comes this ogre, Ha, big stinky ogre, great big ogre. And he comes out and he says, what are you doing here? Now, he's not as big as a giant, but he's an ogre, and they're not very nice. They don't smell very good, and they're not very nice. He says, go away. Well, the dragons are going to go down and try to talk to him. Well, he'll have nothing. That picks up a boulder and throws it at the dragons, right? So the dragons dodge it. Tia goes one way and Desmond goes another way, and he dodges these rocks, and they just want to talk to the ogre. Pretty soon there's another ogre comes out and he says, go away, this is our land. And they said, we want to talk to you. Well, they won't. They went into the crevice, and this is like in between two mountains, and it's not big enough, just like the last time. The dragons can't get in. And they need to have these the ogres come out so they can talk to him, because it's obvious that this missing water has something to do with the ogres. They can't figure it out. Okay, so they finally they think, how are we going to get these ogres out of here? Because the water was coming through that crevice and it's not coming through anymore, and the ogres are in there. So they went around the side of the mountain, and they couldn't see where the water had been, but lo and behold, there was a lake there, like a big pond, but it was a lake. Whoa, did it smell? Oh my goodness, it smelled so bad, and it was green and bubbly, and ugh. And so they finally thought, we've got to find out what this is. And how is it here? And it smells, and it can't be good for anything. So they've tried to figure out, how can they get the ogres out of the mountain, out of this crevice, big crevice like this, so that they can figure out and talk to them. Well, ogres are pretty selfish, and they like to eat, and they like to eat whatever they want, and they gobble it all up. So Tia says, well, why don't we get them something to eat? So they can't figure out what it is they're going to get. And pretty soon Desmond says, let's get them the best thing ever. Let's get them some honey. Oh, okay. So Zach and Demetra take off down to the valley to get a couple of barrels of honey. And what they do then, the others are still yelling, and little Lindley's going down by the crevice. She's looking in there, seeing if she can see him in there and try to talk him out. But they're kind of mean, and so she doesn't want to take her dragon in there, because she might get hurt by those ogres, because they're tricky, and they're not very nice. They're not very nice at all. So she hangs back. So a little while later, here comes Zach and Demetra, and the dragons, each one of them, have 2 big barrels of honey, big barrels, and they set them down in front of the crevice by where this lake is. Pretty soon, wouldn't you know, well, they tapped it so that some of it drained out and drained down into that crevice, and pretty soon, here come those ogres, licking it up and eating it all up until they get to the barrels. And just as they get to the barrels, the dragon swoops down behind them and grabs them. Okay, but they can't hang on to them because they're sticky and they're slippery and all kinds of things. So they call in Tia and Desmond, and Tia and Desmond each have a rope. Their dragons have a rope. So they get the 2. Lindley coaxes them out to where the honey is, and Tia has the rope, and she wraps it quick around the ogres, and she starts going one way with her dragon, and Desmond puts his rope around him, and he goes the other way, and pretty soon the dragons are going around and around, and they have the ogres tied together like this beside the honey bins, the big old tubs. And they said, now talk to us and tell us what's going on. Well, finally they realized they couldn't get out, and they wanted to also protect their property. Well, what was their property? Well, it was this big pond, lake. And what it was ogre nectar. Nectar, more like ogre yuck. But it was what they eat and what they drank. And they used to make it in barrels. And they decided if they could dam up the river and make the water go into a pond or a lake, they could have their own container and make as much of it as they wanted. And they wouldn't have to. Kind of lazy. Remember, they wouldn't have to bottle it. They wouldn't have to put it in barrels. They would just have a lake, and they could go out there and sit and drink. It's like their food. They could eat it or drink it or whatever, and it gave them all the nutrients that you wanted. Nobody else would mess with it because it smelled like a chicken house with rotten eggs in it, bubbling up. So finally, they said, you can't just close off all the water. You just can't, you can't do that. So they said, well, we've got to have our food, and and we don't have any more barrels. So the dragon said, well, let's see what we can do about that. So they took off and they headed back down into the valley. Zachariah and Luke and Demetra, they headed back down into the valley, and lo and behold, didn't they find these great big, they were like granary bins, like small water towers. Now they had to be pretty strong metal because this concoction, this liquid was like so nasty. They were afraid it was going to eat it up. So anyways, they had it, and each dragon could only carry one. So they took it up and put it down at the mountain, and they buried the posts, big towers, like down into the ground. And they helped. Then they unwound the ogres, and they helped them fill all the water towers with this nectar, they called it. And the ogres were so happy that they just sat down and they started eating all their honey. And they said, no, wait a minute. You can't just quit now. We still have water going to the river. And they said, oh, that's over there. What do you mean it's over there? They're lazy, remember? They don't want to do anything. On the other side of the crevice, through the mountain. Well, what do you mean? Well, we just took all the boulders and piled them up so high it blocked the water, and it went into this reservoir. That's how we made our ogre nectar. Oh, okay. So all the dragons, all 6 of them, they headed over there with their riders, and each one of them, and even little Lindley. Lindley gets over there, and she starts taking the little ones, and the dragon picks them up, and they take them over, and they drop them over into a valley. And the other ones sometimes had to get 2 of them at a time to get these boulders out of the way. Sometimes they had to hit them with their tail and smash them. But it wasn't real long until they had broken up the boulders. And lo and behold, the mountain melt, the water, the snow melt coming down began to trickle back down the dry riverbed and head back into the river. There were cheers from everywhere, and they were so excited. They went up and they went in circles in the sky, and they were all excited. And the ogres, they didn't care. They were still eating their honey, and they still had all the ogre nectar they were going to want in their water towers. So the dragons then head back down into the valley, and when they get down there, they are all excited, and they're getting kind of hungry, but they know they're going to have to go home, and they're sitting there chatting and talking about what a wonderful day it was, and they're kind of celebrating, and they hear whoosh coming around the mountain. Whoosh, big golden dragon. The emperor comes down, and he said, good job. You've done good with your mission. He says, you've earned the right to go to dragon school. You've earned the right to go to warrior school and begin to get the weapons you're going to need for in the future. So the next time you come, we're going to go for your military training, and you're going to get your armor and the other things that you need. Now that was a big deal. They'd been waiting a long time to find out that they could do that. So they were excited. They're all standing there kind of bowed down to the emperor, and finally he says, well done, all of you. You did a good job. We'll see you next time. And whoosh, away he was gone. Just then, here comes Pegasus. And the children all say goodbye to their dragons and stand there and wave as they all go over the mountain. And then they clamber up onto Pegasus. Up they go onto his back. And they're all excited because they've just been through this mission, and they know they did a really good job. But they had to say goodbye to Desmond, or to Luke and Zach and Demetra, because they were going to go back another time. They weren't going back on the same ride with Pegasus. So they get on his back, and sure enough, they're so tired they just fell asleep, and he just took them straight home. And the next thing they knew, they were on the couch where Mom was bopping around cleaning up the house. And Desmond looks at Lindley, and Lindley goes, treasure, treasure. And she pulls out her pocket, and she has a water tower. Yeah, a little water tower. Tia reaches in her pocket, and she pulls it out, and she has an ogre. And Desmond reaches in his pocket, and he pulls out a barrel of honey. And his is sticky, so he puts it back in, and when he pulls his hand back out, guess what? Still sticky with honey. He touches it. Tastes like honey. Yep, we really did go there. And the children settled in and went to sleep. I hope you enjoyed the story. Next time we go to Dragon Island, we're going to go to military school. It's going to be awesome, exciting, and scary. Good night.